What's going on, guys? My name's Chandler Smith. The biggest reason I wanted to do this video is because I almost never invested in that first property because of all of the negative feedback I got from people who'd probably never even invested in real estate. Now, obviously I did, and now I own over 60 doors of buy and hold real estate. Every single year, I make over $100,000 just in cash flow from my properties. I am so grateful that I got into real estate. And so in this video, I wanna share with you all of those risks that you hear about. The only thing that I ask you to do is push that like button and subscribe to the channel so that you can not only just mitigate, but also eliminate all of those risks so that you can have the courage to jump into that first property. So let's jump into it. Now, when I tried to think of all of the different risks, I was able to break them down into 5 different categories. And the first one I want to talk about is probably one that's talked about more than any other problem, and that is the liability. And what I mean by the liability is the slip and fall cases because you didn't shovel the walks, or the gas leaks that end up killing someone, or the fire because you didn't have things set up correctly that maybe you caused the fire. And these are the things that really stress people out because not only can they lose for the damages on someone, but they can lose for punitive damages as well, which is above and beyond. Or, I mean, heck, if you're the reason someone died, who knows how much someone could come after you for. You want to get yourself as far away and put essentially some shields between you and your liability. You can do this by, first of all, quit claiming your property into an LLC. That's going to give you one barrier of protection. Now, a lot of people say, Chandler, what about purchasing the property with an LLC? If it's on a business loan, that's a lot easier to do. But a lot of times when you get into investing in real estate, you're using a personal loan that's in your name. So what you need to do is go in and quit claim that over to an LLC. Now, there are certain things tied with your mortgage. If you're using the right loan officer, he can help walk you through that process. So you've got that first barrier. The next barrier of protection you have is making sure that you have the proper insurance on these properties. So meeting up with an insurance guy that's dealt with investment properties so he can get you the proper insurance to protect you there as well. So you've got your LLC and you've got your insurance. Now, the last thing and probably one of the most important things you can do is making sure you've got all of your checks and balances in place. Now, what I mean by this is if you have gas in your property, you need to make sure that you get one of the carbon monoxide testers so that if you ever do have a leak, you have that tester there. And you need to schedule regular maintenance in your calendar and make sure that whoever's doing the regular maintenance writes off that they did it. Now, if you're consistently doing this for the smoke alarms for fire, for the carbon monoxide tester, for any of those potential bigger risks, if you can show you've been doing your end, then that's gonna make it so that you're not open to punitive damages. The other thing you can do other than the general maintenance on these properties for those bigger risks is make sure that if you are ever getting complaints about something, that you take care of it immediately. Because if you have a tenant say, look, the walks are consistently slippery, or there's a crack on the walks, or the stairs are crumbling and I think they're a risk for falling down, but then you don't do something to fix that, not only does that put you more at risk of being responsible for damages to them if something happens, but you can also be responsible for punitive damages, which is damages above and beyond what is just going to paying for what happened. So if someone breaks a leg, not only would you have to pay for the broken leg, but you could pay for things above that broken leg. And that's because they can prove a gross negligence or a greater negligence because the tenant came to you and said, look, this is a problem and you didn't do anything about it. Make sure that you're listening to your tenants and looking for any of these problems so that when they do occur, you can go in and fix them. Because now, if you're constantly looking out for your tenants and fixing problems when they come, and you've done all of these regular checks and balances, and you had your insurance and your LLC set up properly, you have all of these protections to where there is literally no way you're gonna end up in a place where you get hit with this big bill that is gonna put you out of business or put you in the negative because you've gone through and you've almost completely eliminated your liability by doing things properly. The second big concern I hear about a lot is, well, Chandler, what if I get this property and I can't find a tenant? So it's just sitting there and I've got this bill every month, but it's not making me money. Well, here is my advice to you. First off, you need to make sure that you've purchased this property correctly so that when you do get a tenant at fair market rents, you have a huge margin that you're making on them so that you can plan for some vacancy while looking for a tenant. The other reason it's important to buy correctly is so that if you have a certain market rent, you think that you can rent it at, but it's listed for a couple weeks and you're not getting any bites, you have the ability to where you could lower rents $50 or $100 and get it filled immediately. I mean, it's supply and demand. If you're not filling it, you can always lower the price or improve the property so that now more people want it. You want to buy your property so that you can afford to do one of those two things so that you're never in a bind. So make sure that you plan on vacancy with your numbers. Make sure your numbers are strong so that you have the ability to lower rents if you have to, and make sure that you're keeping a little bit in reserves so that if worse comes to worse, you've got something to make sure that you can make that payment. Now, I know you're saying, well, Chandler, that doesn't put me at ease. Here's the thing, I promise you, if you're buying right, even lowering the rents $25 is going to get it filled immediately. Because if you've purchased it right, you know where the market rents are, and I'm hoping you can even fill it above market rents because you've got a good, clean property. But again, even if you don't, you always have that opportunity to lower rents and still be cash flowing. So it's not a big risk. It's just the potential that your return could go from 15% cash on cash down to 10, which is still going to be incredible. Well, what if I get a tenant, but then they don't pay me? What if they're not paying their rent? What am I gonna do? Now, again, if you're purchasing your properties right, you've got flexibility so you can afford to deal with this when it comes. And the best advice I can give you is if they go and they're not paying, you should jump into the eviction process as quickly as possible. A lot of times they're gonna wanna talk you out of it and make you feel like they're gonna get the money. And I know it's hard and you feel like a savage, but the truth is you've got to mean business and you've gotta treat this like a business because you're not screwing them over. All right? They're trying to take advantage of you, and if you hold to going immediately into the eviction process, that's gonna force them to pay quickly, or it's gonna help you to get a tenant in there quickly. Now, this is worst case scenario, and it gets built up as evictions are horrible, and they're a pain, but if you do it right, you're out of rent for 30 days, you can get someone else in there, and you're good to go. Now, again, this is worst case scenario. If you're doing a background check, a credit check, and you're doing all of the right steps to make sure they've got a good, solid income and they're a good tenant, most of the time you're not gonna have to deal with this. I had my first ever eviction all the way through this last year, 6 years into investing in real estate, when I now have over 60 doors, and it was my first ever full-on eviction. So they're not gonna happen a lot, and even when they do, it's not that big of an issue because it happens quickly and you can get someone else in there, as long as you make sure that you're putting the right people in there to begin with. Now, the next risk is one that you hear about more than any other, and that is this big worry that the market is going to crash and you're gonna end up in this terrible place with tons of debt and your world is going to come to an end. The last time the market crashed, the people that really got screwed over were those that either purchased a property as a rental that was not cash flowing at all. And so when they had to lower their rents, they ended up not being able to pay their mortgage. And I think those were few and far between, because the reality is rents don't really drop in a market crash. They might drop a little bit, but not some drastic, crazy drop, unless you're in a market where everyone disappears and there aren't renters, which if you're buying in a good location, that's not going to be a concern. The other people that really got taken advantage of in the market crash were people that bought their own personal residence and then maybe a vacation home or maybe just their personal residence, but they were living at the very edge of what their budget could afford. So when the market crashed, they lost huge value in their property and they couldn't hold on to it because they couldn't afford it, because they had bought properties where the interest rate increased every 5 years or something like that, to where they totally got taken advantage of, where the market took a dive and they couldn't afford to hold on to their properties to ride out the storm. So I'm telling you right now, if you run your numbers properly and you keep a good amount in reserves. Now, everyone will argue on this. I think you should keep 6 months rent in reserves. Now that is a ton, but that's what I do to give me the warm feel goods, so I know I'm always going to be in a good place on my properties. But just know, even without huge reserves, you're not gonna have to lower your rents a ton. If anything, sometimes rents even go up. So don't let this be a risk that keeps you from jumping into the market. Because the next time the market crashes, not only am I not gonna be worried, but I've kept money aside so I can go and pick up some incredible deals and not be worried about my other properties, because not only will they still be cash flowing, but they're going to be cash flowing well because I bought them right. All right, the last risk I want to talk about kind of ties in with some of the earlier ones, but it's the risk or concern of, what if I get a tenant and I get this awesome property and I put the tenant in and they totally wreck the property. They destroy the carpet, they put holes in the walls, they destroy everything in there, and now I've got this huge bill. So I'm not making money, but I've got all of these damages to deal with. Guys, this is a risk, but there are a lot of ways you can mitigate it. You can make sure you're running a background check. You can make sure you're running a credit check. You can make sure that they have good income. You can talk to other people that they've rented from and make sure that you hear from them that they've been good tenants. You can do all of these checks and balances to make sure you get a good tenant. But even if you don't, that's why you plan for expenses. That's why you have money in reserves. And that's why you buy your properties correctly, so that even with these hits, you're gonna be able to weather the storm because you purchased things properly and you knew eventually you were gonna have to dive into that expense budget that you set aside. Because crap happens, but even when it does, if you've purchased properties right, you still are set up to cash flow extremely well and make great money. And that's the last point I want to leave you with. You're going to hear risks. You're going to have a lot of people that are naysayers, that have either just had 1 or 2 rental properties that had a bad experience, or that have never owned rental properties at all. And they're going to be trying to tell you why you shouldn't invest in real estate, why it's a terrible idea. But here's the thing, I'm telling you from the other end of the spectrum that people that invest in real estate and do it properly love it. Because whether the market's good or bad, whether the tenants are good or bad, regardless of what happens, you create a passive income that will build at an exponential rate. You've got appreciation, principal pay down, tax benefits, cash flow, and it's something that can put you in the place that you want to be. It can give you the lifestyle that you want. It can give you the freedom to do what you want, when you want, and it's a ton of fun along the way. So don't buy into these risks, don't buy into these worries, and I promise you, as you invest in real estate, you're gonna be able to set yourself up for life. If you enjoyed the video, push the like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out my other videos, because my goal is to help you create a passive income so that you can have the life that you want. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.